Hey guys, it's Yorkie here with some Project Cars and Apex Online Racing League Season 3, Round 3 at Zolder, and as you can see the conditions are pretty wet. The conditions aren't meant to change for the race either, so it's going to be wet throughout the entire duration. And as you can see, we're kind of getting towards dusk and sunset. It's fairly late in the afternoon, and the race will be starting off in these sort of conditions and then going into the night. So be interesting with the temperature change. Currently on an outlap at the moment, but I've got a car behind me, so I can't really back off too much. Plus I also want to try and keep as much temperature in the tyres as possible, whilst of course not taking too much of the tread off the tyres as well on this initial lap. I need to generate the heat into the brakes as well, and basically just trying not to hold up any of the guys around me, whilst also trying to create a little bit of space in front. And we've got that nice little bit of space, it's not too bad. It's one of the R8s who's in front of us, and he seems to be relatively quick, so it shouldn't hinder us on our actual qualifying lap as we come down towards the last couple of corners. We'll need to get a good exit coming out of these to actually start the lap. At the moment I'm currently in P8, as you can see, with a 1:37.9, and we're going to see if we can try and improve on that. So we need get a good exit coming out of here, trying to put the power down as smoothly as possible, try and not get too much wheel spin. There's a little bit of oversteer on the exit there, but it wasn't too bad, perfectly manageable. And we're now coming down to start the actual qualifying lap, braking down into turn 1, down into second gear, trying to get the curb on the inside there and trying to avoid the curb on the exit. It's a little bit shy of the apex, which made me a little bit wider than I would have liked to have been, clipping the curb quite nicely into turn 2, avoiding the curb on the exit there. And you basically want to take this turn 3 as well. You want to try and get the car flat out if you can, but it's not always necessarily possible. Turn 4, you want to try and carry as much speed through as possible, try and open up the exit for yourself and try and generate that late apex in a nice smooth run there. As we come down to the first chicane, we've got to try and avoid dipping at least, well, I need to keep at least 2 wheels within the white lines. We do that quite nicely. We're going to aim for the yellow badge as we come up over the bridge and back down the other side and now into this next chicane. Very, very important not to cut the chicane in any way and try and keep those 2 wheels within the white lines, doing that very nicely. A little bit of oversteer as we came out of the exit of the second part of that chicane, but managing to hold it not quite flat out through that right-hander there, which would be in the dry. I want to try and straight line that little left-handed kink as you come over the bridge, now into the braking zone of that hairpin there, hooking up a nice late apex, trying to get on the power as soon as possible and try and put as much power down as soon as possible. To come now down towards the last couple of corners, braking just before we get to the bridge, down into first gear, hooking up the curb quite nicely on the inside, avoiding the 2 large sausage curbs on the inside of both of those 2, getting a good exit as we come down towards the start finish line. Where are we going to be? We're going to be P3 with a 1:37.2 dead, which is a very, very good lap. And there you can see the actual final qualifying results, and I ended up qualifying in 6th position. There was about 4 or 5 minutes for the rest of the qualifying session after I did that lap, so a number of the guys have managed to put themselves ahead of me, but starting in 6th position, it's the best qualifying so far of the season, and it's putting me in a very good position for this race. My teammate is qualified in 11th place, so it'll be interesting to see what he can do from there. And of course I'm hoping to get a good start myself, see if we can gain possibly a couple of positions in the start, and basically just try and run my race, manage the tyres, and see if we can go the full distance on one set. So here we go then with the actual race, round 3 at Zolder. There's my beautiful Z4 in 6th position. We got the inside for turn 1, and we just got to hope we get a good start, manage the wheel spin and wait for those green lights, which are there, launching off the line now, getting a pretty decent launch straight away. 2 guys in front of me moving over to the right hand side of the track, which is giving me a little bit of room on the inside, but Tipple's got to move across to block that. Got the inside here of the car, who started alongside me, trying to get through it nice and cleanly and basically avoid making any contact. Just had a clear right message, but I'm going to hold a kind of middle ground through this second corner and basically allow any room for anyone who was potentially there on the inside, trying to look through the spray for the cars in front. But we've gone up into 5th position as we get a little bit onto the grass there in the entrance of turn 4, but managing to get in towards the apex, just making sure that my lights are turned on for this race as we come now down into the chicane. Very, very important that we don't make any cuts and keep those 2 wheels within the white lines, which we do quite nicely, getting through there and just following the car in front So I've gained 1 position so far in this first half of the lap. It doesn't look like too many people are going super aggressive at the moment. I'm basically just trying to settle down into this race in these rather tricky conditions. So it looks like Nostra is getting very close to the rear of my car there through the chicane, just holding on to the back of Tipper quite nicely. He's only 4/10 up in front, and you can see him just there right in front of us, a couple of car lengths in his roof. Coming into the hairpin now. So basically just trying to take it nice and steady, trying to make sure that we're hooking up the apexes, we're not running deep, we're not scrubbing the tyres too much, locking up any wheels or wheel spinning and potentially causing a spin. Just want to take it easy for the moment. As we now come towards the end of lap 1, and you can see Tipple is starting to pull away a little bit. He's brought the gap up to 0.8 of a second now. I'm now 0.8 of a second in front of Nostra, who is behind me. So a good first lap so far. We've gained 1 position, which is nice. The field is starting to spread out a little bit, so it's all now about just settling into that rhythm, not really worrying too much about the cars around you. Then once you've kind of got yourself settled, see what you can start doing with your race from there. A little bit of oversteer there as he came into the entry of turn 4 in towards that apex. Had to kind of turn out of the corner a little bit. It was fairly close to cutting it as well on my initial line. Taking the chicane quite nicely. It does compromise you a fair amount, not trying to attack the curbs too much. There is a good line that you can take through that. If you stay off the 2 larger curbs on the inside, you take that, it does feel good. But if you do clip those large red curbs on the inside of either of the 2 curbs, the rumble strips, it can quite easily unsettle the car, and in these conditions,
the gap behind is now
it can be very, very difficult to recover. So just taking it nice and smooth and steady for now, not trying to attack too much. You can see, not in the spray anymore of Teppel in front of us. He's gone and got the gap up to 1.5 seconds at the moment. So he seems to be doing, he seems to be going about 7.5 tenths a lap quicker than myself at the moment.
Your tyre temperatures look good.
But I'm also extending the gap to Nostra behind, which is quite good. So kind of starting to get into a bit of a, almost like a no man's land, but I'm just hoping to kind of keep in touch with the guys in front. You can see them all there in distance. Seems like P1 is pulling away from P2. P2 and P3 seem relatively close together, just a couple of car lengths between them. There's a bit of a gap between P3 and Tipple and P4. And then obviously you can see the gap between myself and Tipple, and also myself and Nostra, who's in the rear view mirror, just coming over the bridge now and into the picture. And then there is another car in P7 who isn't too far behind him, in a kind of a similar sort of distance gap that myself and, it's actually now Silver Arrow, sorry, have. So I'm guessing Nostra's going to spun off somewhere behind me. He was 1.5 seconds behind now. He's going to drop behind Silver Arrow. Silver Arrow is 3.3 seconds. So yeah, even more breathing room now for myself behind, which is good. Should make it easier to kind of relieve the pressure a little bit. And I'm kind of holding steady with Tipple at the moment. The gap is still 1.5, 1.6 seconds. So picked up the pace a little bit. You can see that 2 tenths quicker than my final, sorry, my previous lap.
Off the pace in sector 2.
And obviously Tipple must have run a little bit slower there in that lap compared to his second lap that he did, where he had previously eked out the gap. So yeah, spray's not too much of an issue now, which is quite nice. It helps with the visibility. Also don't have a set of headlights lighting up the inside of my car either, which helps with the frame rate, and it's also a lot less distracting. Just taking a look at the temperatures at the moment, you can see that the rear left is getting fairly warm. It's up at 104, 105 degrees at the moment. And obviously this being a clockwise based circuit, it's the left-handed tyres, or tyres on the left-hand side of the car, that do receive the most punishment. Speaking of tyres, we tend to run social races of the league race that we're going to be doing the night before the actual league race itself. So we run our league races on a Wednesday night, and we tend to run a social night on the Tuesday with exactly the same settings that we'll be running in the league race, doing the full race distance, which is good practice for a number of us. Basically, once we got our setups sorted out, we tend to use that as kind of more seeing how good our setups really are in full race conditions, and also basically using it as a strategy experiment, basically seeing what kind of thing will work, what won't work, and just getting an idea of what the race will be like in terms of pace compared to other people and then around us. But in that social race, I was getting much less tyre wear than a lot of the other drivers around me. For some reason I was able to look after the tyres a hell of a lot better. Don't know whether this was basically my driving style change that I kind of had to adapt for patch 6, where the tyres overheated quite easily, and I don't know whether it was because of that where I had to kind of adapt a more smooth and I guess consistent and patient driving style, as I was a little bit rough and ragged beforehand, and I was finding that I was overheating the tyres quite badly. So basically reeled myself in a little bit, tried a number of different various techniques, and I kind of found something that worked for myself and something that I quite liked. I felt like I actually improved my driving a fair bit as well for this season. But yeah, I don't know whether it's that and I was just able to manage the tyres a lot better because of the driving style, or whether it was the setup that I had for this car. But a number of the guys seem to be eating through their tyres quite quickly, my teammate being one of them, and
just done a
myself, well, I barely eat into them at all.
Keep digging. This isn't over
if you actually look on lap 6, or the start of lap 6, at the actual tyre HUD display down in the bottom right, which does, the green area does reduce as the tyre life goes down, but you can see the tyres are in a very good condition. Considering the amount of tread that I have left, they've barely had any life taken away from them at the moment, and it's that aspect of the race that I really want to play into my hands. There you can see it a little bit more accurately as I quickly flashed up the telemetry HUD there. So tyres are in a very good state at the moment, and basically my idea is to try and hang on to the guys in front of me as much as possible, and try and not let them pull away too much, so that when they start struggling with the tyres and they start to get down to the lower percentages of their tyre life, that I'll be able to capitalise on my tyres condition and the amount of tyre life that I should have when I get to that same point, or shall I say that same point in the race. Basically I'll be able to use that extra grip to my advantage, close that gap back up, and potentially make a couple of passes. I don't know what other people's strategies are. I know my teammate is probably going to have to make a pit stop in this race, as he found his tyre life was very bad. He was eating through his tyres very quickly, so he'll probably need to make a stop. A number of other people will probably be aiming to make a stop, so hopefully I'll be able to gain a couple of positions in that as well, if any of the guys in front of me are going to make the switch onto a fresh set of wet tyres. Like I said in the qualifying, the conditions won't be changing in terms of the actual weather. The time of day will. It's obviously 5 times weather progression, time progression, not weather, which means starting, I think it was around 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon in game time, the race started, which means we will be going into the night. I have accounted for that in the setup, and also along with the pressures of the tyres as well. So I'm hoping I shouldn't really need to make a stop in this race, and hopefully I'll be able to get a decent result from that. And for those of you who have been watching the road up in front of me, you should be able to see that Tipple is closing up on the back of P3, and they were a little bit closer than they currently are at the moment on this lap. So hopefully in the next couple of laps, if they actually start battling each other a fair bit more, I should be able to close up the gap or kind of help maintain it, because at the moment Tipple is pulling away from me. He's got the gap up to 3.2 seconds, but I am also pulling away from Silver Arrow, who is 6.2 seconds behind me as we come into the last couple of corners of lap 7.
The leader has just done a 1:36.9.
And we're going to be going into lap 8. So the leader doing very quick lap times at the moment, almost 2 seconds quicker than what I am doing. Just very impressive pace, and no doubt that'll be F1 Massa, who is, yeah, he's very quick. In all the races that we've done so far, he seems to have a fairly big margin over the majority of the people in the lobby. Karki can take the battle to him and kind of keep him honest, but I don't think Karki is running in this race.
The gap in front is
from what I remember from the qualifying results. Getting a good line through the chicane. Just trying to keep those two wheels within the white lines at all times through all the chicanes. Like this one here is very easy to cut, and we made it very clear prior to the race that the of the white line rules and the track limits, and not to abuse them. And people who do get caught abusing track limits will be punished for that. So we've all gone into this race knowing what the rules are, and we're hoping to, well, I'm certainly hoping to stay within those. That's my aim.
He's just done a 1:37.0.
So far, haven't really had any clear cuts or track extending abuse so far.
That's your fastest lap.
I'm going to do,
stay on it. This isn't over
yet.
yet.
Be a case of just backing out the throttle to make sure that I negate any advantage that I would have gained. Right there, that was perfectly fine. The white line was kind of towards the middle of the car. Getting a nice smooth run through turns 2 and also 3. Turn 3 can be, I find that it's almost flat out. It's not quite. On a qualifying lap you could probably just about do it. On a full fuel run like I currently am in this race at the moment, it's lifting off to about 80-90% throttle and going through, and if you get the line right, you won't really have too many issues with the rear tyres, wheel spinning. And at the moment, although it looks like the temperatures are quite high on the rear tyres, kind of hanging around the 100 to 105 mark fairly consistently, I'm not really feeling too much of an issue in terms of tyre grip at the rear. And as you can see with the lap times as well, going 0.03 of a second quicker through sector 1 and 2, and my fastest lap so far in this race. I'm still able to maintain the pace quite nicely. Hopefully you should be able to carry that through the next few laps.
The leader has just done a 1:36.9.
And for myself, I've basically picked up the pace a little bit, seeing that Tipple and also the guy in front, who I believe is RC Monster, otherwise known as Pedro.
Keep them coming. That's
they're getting fairly close to each other.
Now
There could be potential for those two battling. As you can see, there's only a car length, maybe just less than 2 car lengths, 1.5 perhaps, between the two of them. So that should hopefully slow those two down a little bit. And if I push a little bit harder now, maybe able to close the gap to those two guys. Of course, I don't want to take too much life out of the tyres either. You can see the front left starting to decrease a little bit in terms of tyre tread. Getting it very wrong there through the chicane, taking a little bit too much curb on the inside of the very first part, which basically just pulled the car over to the left, and I had to fight and wrestle it to get it back straight again. And as you can see, I've gone and lost roughly a second there just through that chicane alone. So you can see how important it is just to be consistent and make sure that you're nailing all your braking points and apexes, and that you're not lighting up the rear tyres and potentially spinning the car or having to fight it. You lose a lot of time to the other people around you, and it's better to just play it safe and lose a couple of attempts per lap than it is to push really hard and potentially spin and then lose 5 seconds on a lap. So yeah, it's all very much the risk versus reward at the moment. The risk for pushing really hard is quite high, whereas the reward could potentially be rather low. At the moment I've currently got myself a very good position. P5 will give us a very good haul of points. Silver Arrow is a good 7 seconds behind, so don't really need to worry about him. I can have 1 or 2 small mistakes of missing an apex here or there. That won't really cost me too much time. I'm basically just trying to play a patient game at the moment and waiting for the moment when the guys in front, their tyres start dropping off a little bit more, as they seem to drop off in various stages. You've got, when you very first put on a bolt of brand new tyres, the tread feels very, very good. There's an awful lot of grip and you'll feel that straight away, but it tends to hang around for about a lap and a half, and then that kind of drops off, and then the tyres stay relatively consistent for a good amount of time, probably 8 to 10 laps or something like that, and then they tend to drop a little bit and they seem to be okay again for another 5-6 laps, maybe slightly less, and they drop a little bit more.
The leader's just done us one.
Basically I tend to find that once I get up to about 38-40% in terms of tyre life in the actual Logitech, not the Logitech profiler, sorry, the Project Cars profiler, once I get to about 38-40%, that's when the tyres do start to fall away from you, and around that time in the actual HUD display in game it'll be pretty low in terms of the gauge down in that bottom right as to how much tyre tread you got left, as the basically 100% on that HUD in the game. 100% is about 50% in the profiler, because the profiler counts basically the entirety of the tyre, so that's both the tread and also the carcass that's underneath it, whereas the actual Project Cars game only counts the tread. So once those gauges do completely disappear and they do become empty, you can still carry on driving, but you'll be driving on the carcass of the tyre, and yeah, the performance of the tyre is very, very bad. It's multiple seconds off, and it only gets worse and worse. So it's not really worth going that far with the tyres, and it's better to just put a new set on. But like I said earlier in the race, my tyre life performance was very, very good, and as you can see in that HUD down in the bottom right, I haven't taken too much life out of the tyres so far, despite being on lap 12. So I believe I was getting less than basically 1% of tyre life being taken off per lap. I think it was probably about 0.6, 0.7, which is extremely good. I think that maybe have been a bit of a combination between both the setup and also the new driving style, although there it's pushing a little bit too hard, a little bit too much steering lock whilst getting on the throttle, which would have just scrubbed the tyres at the front. And there you can see myself doing it again with this McLaren in front of me, who is a lap down, and yeah, that doesn't help with the tyre life at all. And also, as you saw, it pushed me out quite wide with an awful lot of understeer, and that would have cost me even more time. And as you can see, to the deltas down in the bottom left, Tipple is now 6.3 seconds up the road, and Papan has now actually got in front of Silver Arrow, so we're getting closer to this McLaren in front, so he'll probably move out of the way relatively soon. I hope not to hold us up too much. There's not really anywhere to pass coming through the chicane, but he goes over to the left now there, and that right-hander to let me take the inside line and allow me to slip past him without losing too much time. So that was quite good, that was quite nice of him.
3 seconds.
And that worked out relatively well, but yeah, Papan has now managed to get himself up into 6th position ahead of Silver Arrow.
The leader has just done a
Papan is
37.2.
pretty quick, so kind of need to watch out for him. He may potentially start closing the gap down to myself. Not entirely sure of his pace at the moment. And obviously I'm trying to keep pace at least somewhat with Tipple in front of me.
Sector 2 is a second off the pace.
However,
You're a second off the pace in Sector 1.
A little bit of time there.
Dropping off. Come on, you can do better than
a pretty
this.
poor first
P5.
sector.
Come on, stay focused. Apexes and exits. Apexes and exits.
Also trying to lap traffic, and I just had the engineer giving me some what they call pearls of wisdom. It's basically just a little bit of motivational talk, trying to encourage me to pick up my performance, consistency.
The gap behind is now 6.9 seconds.
So it sounds like Papan's closing a little bit to myself behind. He's got the gap down from 7.2 or 7.3 seconds, has now dropped below 6. We're hanging around the 7-second mark. And it looks like Pedro, or RC Monster, has gone to swap places with Tipple. Tipple's managed to get up ahead of him somewhere along the line. You can now see that Pedro is only 3.7 seconds up in front, so they may have, I don't know whether that was them battling or whether Pedro had a moment and went off track and lost a lot of time because of that. Looks like came from battling an overtake somewhere along the line, as you can see Tipple was still just in front of Pedro, so gained a little bit of time there, and now might see if we can pick up the pace a little bit and see if we can hold this gap, because that will put us in a very good position. We're currently at 15 out of 40, as you can see in the bottom left there. And usually when people go for pit stops, they tend to do it around the halfway mark. So if I'm expecting anyone to pit, it'll be between lap 18 and probably lap 25-30. It really depends on how bad their tyre life or tyre preservation is. If they're really bad and they're really struggling with the tyres, they may pit a little bit early, probably around lap 18, 19. Maybe try and hold out until lap 20 at the actual halfway mark itself. But some guys who are probably doing a little bit better may be able to go on into the 20s and basically see how long they go before it gets too much, and they just need to pit. And I think any time after lap 30 is probably too late. You don't really have the time to, or the number of laps, sorry, to make up the time that you had lost when driving on a slower set of tyres. But myself, I'm going to see if I can go the full distance. And at the moment, it seems like my lap times seem to be on par with my fastest lap so far of this race. I was up in Sector 2 by about 0.03 of a second. So, providing I get a good run through these last two corners, which we do rather nicely, a little bit of oversteer there on the exit, but not too much. Managed that quite nicely. It should be in for a pretty good lap here so far.
You've just done a
Yep, there's my fastest lap of the race.
Good lap. That's your quickest today. Come on, stay focused. Apexes and exits. Apexes and exits.
3 tenths.
A few tenths off the pace.
God, the engineer likes to talk quite a lot, doesn't he? Which is actually quite funny, because I like to talk an awful lot too. But yeah, back to the race then. Seem to be doing pretty good so far in terms of lap performance. Certainly lap times anyway. Tyre life still good. Temperatures still seem pretty good there on the Motec display, along with the brake temperatures as well. They seem quite good, though climbing up rather high, fairly high shall I say, in the braking zone there for that chicane. Obviously cooling now to get up to a little bit of speed, and then braking here for this chicane, just popping up into the 600s on the front, which is, it's getting pretty hot. I tend to aim for probably around between 5 to 600 is where I ideally want my brakes to be. That's where I tend to find that they perform their best. Anything over 600 you start to lose a little bit of performance, and then over 650 you're running into braking issues. You're just gonna increase the brake fade over the duration of the race quite substantially. So yeah, around the 600 mark is good. It's where I'd like them to be. I probably would like them to be a little bit cooler, of which I would have needed to have opened up the brake ducts a little bit more, but of course in doing that you're also a little bit slower.
Lap times are improving. This is exactly what we need.
Straights. Now you can see I've done a 138.053, 1 well, not should I say 0.1, I think 7 seconds quicker than previous fastest laps, so able to put in a couple of good consistent fast laps at the moment. Gap is coming down to Pedro in front of us. We are gaining on him. He is now 2.5 seconds up the road, 2.6 seconds. So yeah, in a very, very good position. This is where the other guys' tyres should be starting to drop off, is roughly around this point. And as you can see down in the bottom right there on the HUD, my tyre life is very, very good. I probably just heard that I backed out of the throttle a little bit there. That was to try and negate any advantage that I had.
Car right, clear right.
Going over the chicane, because I thought I may have cut it a little bit, so I backed out of the throttle just to make sure that I negated that advantage. And as you probably saw there was a Z4 parked on the right hand side on
8 seconds.
the mid part of that chicane. He basically went across the gas on the inside there to let Tipple, Pedro and also myself through without holding us up. Usually drivers don't have to quite go to that sort of drastic level in terms of moving out the way and letting a driver lap you, but even still, it was nice that it didn't really hold
down in sector 2. You're 2 tenths
anyone
off the
up.
pace in sector 3. That's 5th. Come on, keep digging.
That poor lap time just came from a number of mistakes. I think turn 1 I was carried a little bit too much speed coming through. I couldn't get on the power as soon as I wanted, and I basically had to hesitate, otherwise I would have just run over the curb on the exit, potentially onto the grass beyond that as well, which definitely would not have been good. And then obviously coming through this first chicane that we're now approaching, I thought that I may have cut the chicane a little bit, so backed out of the throttle from that to negate the advantage. But yeah, holding good pace with the guys in front, and we're also actually pulling away from Papan as well. The gap's now back up to 7.5 seconds that you can see there down under the delta in the bottom left. You did previously manage to get the gap down to under 6 seconds, but I think those couple of good fast laps that I put in brought that gap back up. So yeah, good position at the moment, just as we're approaching the halfway mark. This is where I imagine the pit window will start to open.
Just done a 1:37.5.
It's not mandatory for people to make a pit stop. It's there as an option. If they want to take it, they can. If they don't have to. But this is where I'm going to predict that people could potentially start making their pit stops if they are suffering with the tyres quite badly. But I'm currently doing...
You're 2 tenths off the pace in sector 1. You're a second off the pace in sector 2. You're a few tenths off the pace in sector 3.
Yeah, I'm currently doing very well with my tyre life. So I'm happy. I'm in a very good position. And as you can see, we've actually gone into the night now as well. Starting off in those dusk/sunset conditions. Things becoming a little bit more difficult to spot in terms of your braking points, your apexes. There are floodlights around this circuit, not all the way around the circuit though. So you do have to rely on your car's headlights in a number of places. However, it's much, much better lighting than Donington. Donington had pretty much none. The only lights that were in and around the circuit were down the start-finish straight on the pit buildings, and yeah, they didn't really extend out onto the track in any real way, shape or form.
gap in front is now 3.2 seconds. The leader's just done a 1:36.9.
So you can tell how far ahead the leader is then. Basically, as I come into sector 3, he's completing the lap. So it's quite a way up the road. As you can probably tell, getting a little bit more aggressive with my driving, trying to pick up the pace again a little bit more, knowing that these guys are probably going to be running a little bit slower than they would like to be with their tyres falling off. So time to start pushing, see if we can maintain the gap, possibly close it a little bit and try and give myself the best opportunity as possible to gain places and capitalise on this potential situation that could be unfolding in front of us. And we're actually in with a very, very good chance of getting a podium for this race. Doubt I'll be able to get second. Mini Black is pretty quick and we can't really seem to visually see him at any point around the circuit so far. So he's probably a little bit too far up in the distance, probably chasing F1 Massa, trying to stay as close to him as possible. However, Tipple, who is currently in third, was getting a little bit of a moment there coming into the chicane. The rear end just stepped out on me on the initial turn in, and I had to give it a flick off the opposite lock and also stay off the throttle to hope that the rear tyres grip back up again, which they did fortunately. It's a good thing there's a very slow speed corner that would have obviously aided with the tyres regaining their grip, and also meant that if I did actually spin out, it wouldn't be too much of a loss, so there'll be less speed to bleed. But yeah, like I was saying, Tipple and Pedro just here up in front of me. Pedro 2.8 seconds, 2.9 seconds, so he's extended the gap a little bit, but yeah, only being 3 seconds up the road, and then Tipple only a few tenths, probably about half a second to a second, just up in front of Pedro. Yeah, very good position for potentially getting a podium here, so hoping we can continue the good form that we've had so far in this race. So we come bouncing into turn 4. It's quite an awkward dip and bump upon the initial entry.
The gap's now 2.7 seconds.
And you can see the consistency of the first sector. 0.013 of a second, only 1/100th of a second off my fastest lap time so far, and the gap to Pedro is 2.5. It was 2.5 coming into the chicane initially, is now creeping back up again. It does tend to fluctuate an awful lot, but yeah, this is good. Very good position at the moment.
The leader has just done a 1:38.0.
And hopefully we can maintain the consistency to get the podium at the end of the race as well. We've just stepped over the halfway mark on lap 21, coming up towards lap 22. So I imagine these guys up ahead are struggling with their tyres a fair bit. And also the guys behind me, as you can see, Papan has dropped down to 9.5 seconds behind.
That's fifth.
So he's losing a little bit of pace there. I don't know what's going on with the two drivers in first and second, F1 Massa and also Mini Black. Don't really know what's going on with my teammate at the moment either. And any of the other drivers from 7th position onwards.
You've used half your fuel.
So yeah, basically just focusing on my own race. I just want to make sure that I get a good haul of points from this race for the team and also for myself for the Drivers' Championship. Very, very good opportunity here to get a very good result. Being a little bit tentative there, initially coming into the chicane. Obviously on the previous lap or two ago I had the slight moment. I got a little bit sideways when I turned in,
just done a 1:37.3.
so I didn't want to turn in too much. As you can feel, the rear end was still a little bit loose. Temperatures are on the tyres are actually good at the moment. Front right's a little bit cold. Kind of around the 80 mark. Ideally, I'd like that up at 85 or higher. But doesn't feel like there's too much of a grip loss at the moment. The other three tyres are looking pretty good. The front left and the rear right are pretty much bang on where I'd like them to be. And the rear left is probably a little bit hot, but it's not really affecting me too much. It's quite easily manageable. And I think I've basically just got the perfect balance for the car with the setup for this race and the conditions. So it's not oversteering too much, it's not understeering too much. It's got that sweet spot. It's very nice and easy to manage, and with the amount of practice that I put in, basically just worked on apexes and braking points, just making sure that I can run a very consistent lap. So yeah, all is looking good so far, and things are looking very, very good now, considering that Pedro is less than 2 seconds up ahead. You can see the gap has visually reduced. I think he may have dropped off the back of Tipple a little bit more. Looks like that gap between Tipple and Pedro has extended, and Papan is kind of still hanging around the 9 to 9.5 second mark behind as well. So
the leader has just done a 1:37.7.
Yeah, very happy. Just need to keep the focus, maintain the consistency, and just hope that the guys around us start to make mistakes as their tyres start to go, or alternatively go in for a pit stop, which will obviously gift me the position, and hopefully my tyres will be able to last the duration of the race and actually be able to hold on to the end and hold on to what could potentially be a third position. So turn 2 very smooth, turn 3 very good as well, trying to minimise the steering angle as much as possible. Turn 4, spot on as well. Good, nice, good, smooth flowing line through there. I was able to pick up the throttle quite nicely. Coming into the braking zone for the chicane. Quite good through there as well. Quite nice line. Aim forward just to the left of that badge on the bridge, sponsorship badge. Try and get the car as straight as possible, ready for the braking into that chicane that we've just been through, which is quite nice and smooth. That right hander there was quite nice and smooth. This one isn't quite flat out, it is flat out in the dry, but in the wet the rear tyres can spin up a little bit.
Done a 1:37.4. The gap in front is now
1.9
seconds.
With the lap being so smooth so far, currently 0.15 seconds up on my fastest lap in the second sector. So good stuff, good pace so far. Sector 3 we got nailed down pretty good as well. Tiny bit of oversteer coming out of the exit of the final corner, but we should be on for a fastest lap of the race there. Personal best 1:37.9, which is very nice. Obviously it's not the fastest lap of the race, but it's my fastest lap of the race. That's what I was meant to say. And the gap is still hovering around the 2 second mark. Pedro up in front. So things are looking good. Obviously he'll be pushing and trying to keep with Tipple and also try and keep me at bay, but obviously whilst doing that he's going to suck the life out of his tyres. Obviously I'm sucking the life out of mine as well, but even still 25 laps in and my tyres are in a very, very good condition. If you look down at the gauge down in the bottom right there, almost losing the rear end as we come into the chicane, especially that first part. Kind of tempted to float a little bit and rotate around a little bit further than I would have liked to, so I kind of had to hesitate getting on the throttle a little bit, but nothing too major. I was able to hold on to that quite nicely, and we haven't really lost any time to Pedro up in front either, so nothing too much to worry about there.
Just done a 1:37.4.
You can see the amount of time that cost me as well. 4 attempts or so on this lap so far. So here we come then. End of lap 25 in towards the beginning of lap 26. It's the lap time that we're going to do this time round. It'll be a 38.3, that's not too bad. Coming to turn 1, nailing the braking point quite nicely, getting the car turned in. And there, as you just saw, the most frustrating thing that you can get in a league race, which is a disconnect from the server, which means that I will not be scoring any points from this race. And there was also a number of other dropouts. I think there was about 4 of us in total. 2 guys did disconnect earlier in the race. But looking at the final results here, you can also actually see a number of disqualifications there down at the bottom. Those go to F1 Massa, Brownski and Hutch. Brownski and F1 Massa were deemed to abuse the track limits too much and were therefore handed a disqualification for the race, and they scored no points. And also Hutch, he was also involved with a couple of incidents with a number of drivers, and I think was kind of on the limits of track limit abuse as well, and also got a disqualification. So yeah, not many people are actually getting results. The last point scoring position was 9th place, which was Vice Guy. So yeah, a lot of points missed out on this race. Myself and also Andrex both disconnected from the race in this in the little mass disconnect that we had. So unfortunately there's been no points scored for Eurex Racing, which is extremely frustrating considering I was on for what was a pretty good opportunity, the best opportunity so far of the season to get a podium. So yeah, that just kind of rubbed salt into the wounds a little bit, but unfortunately that is the way it goes sometimes in league racing. But either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Obviously I'll be back for the next round as well. Hopefully I can get that to you guys as soon as possible. But if you enjoyed the video, please give it a rating. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them down below and I'll try and get back to you as soon as possible. But in the meantime, thanks very much for watching guys. Hopefully I shall see you soon. Take care.